Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery and I've got a couple trays worth of delicious foods set aside to feed some worms with. It's really just a combination of what is it? Brussels sprout leaves and banana peels. And I've also got kind of a staple food item, coffee, all ready to go as well. The systems we're going to be feeding today are red wigglers and they live in these two black tubs. There's about a month in difference in the ages of these two systems, and there's a few other differences, such as the number of worms that were used to populate each system. You can see that the older system, the 108-day-old system, has close to 1,700 worms versus the younger system over here having fewer than 1,000. The novelty item that's been in these two bins now for 55 days is a cotton towel, and at that age you would have to expect to see some progress already. So I've been trying to also stimulate activity there by putting the foods right on or around the towel, trying to just increase traffic in general. Stuff that I fed last time that I thought would probably bring worms by was stuff like bread, a few chunks of bread, some cantaloupe melon rinds, strawberries, not just the leaves of strawberries or just the stems, but pretty much whole strawberries, and just the typical etc. accounts for the coffee and the worm chow and stuff like that. So these little guys are due for their 10th and 7th feedings today. So we're going to get them up on the bench and get them fed. Let's get to work. The things that I consider staple, I mentioned the concept of staple food items and staple supplementary items in my previous comment. It was things like the grit. In my case, it's pulverized eggshell that you see in here. So the grit is a staple item that I consider. The bedding can be anything, it could be shredded little stuff like this. It could just be any pieces of paper, newspaper, whatever you got around. And I guess the other staple thing around here is typically my worm chow. So other things come into play as well when they're available, but those are the things I was referring to. So let's get these little guys taken care of. Last time we did swap out this top covering newspaper, so this was brand new when we came in here last time. And we had also replaced the feeding zone indicator too, which is sort of blending in over here on the top covering. So those were all brand new last time we came in here 12 days ago. Oops. So I don't think we need to replace these top coverings. They're holding up good. Feeding zone indicator, though, we've got replacement coffee, which comes with filters. So this I think we'll just recycle as some supplementary bedding as well down in the feeding area. So the feeding zone indicator showed us where we last placed all those items to go hand in hand with the towel. So some of the other types of bedding you'll see, I used shredded paper cardboard as the example before, but leaves just as good as bedding. Worms definitely seem to like it. And we're going to also bump into leftovers. The bedding is usually a leftover because it too will transform into food over time, but until it does, it's their bedding too. This is the seed from an avocado. When I give it a press, I usually like to try to put it down a little bit lower like I did there, just in case it slips out of my fingers, wants to go flying. I can sort of contain it instead of having it end up on the other end of the room. So that's usually one of the good signs that that seed is pretty close to the end at this point. So I helped it along a lot too, just by increasing its surface area significantly, opening it up. So that was kind of cool. I don't know if you noticed that there. I was just picking up the watermelon, not watermelon, the cantaloupe melon rind. And you can see that the worms pretty much stripped it clean of any cantaloupe that might have still been stuck to it. The rind, the tough part on the outside, they'll get that done too, but I'll take a little bit longer since it's a little bit tougher material. I see lots of little babies in here too. All kinds of nice worms hanging out. Let's finish the excavation of this piece of cotton. I would like to think that after 55 days it's probably a lot weaker than it was when we put it in here. And we already put it in here in a really weak state. It had been a towel that was left out in a window and exposed to sunlight, direct sunlight, for a long, long time. Years. So this fabric is already so weak. I could just punch my finger through it almost effortlessly, even before it was given to the worms. It's the main reason I'm being so, careful with this stuff, because I know that I can destroy it myself instantly. I could tear it to pieces if I wanted to, but I'd really rather see what um, progress it makes on its own against the worms. So here was the recycled top covering newspaper from last time. So not much as far as leftovers, right? The strawberries, I guess if we see anything green, that's newspaper actually, but a bad example. Figured maybe we would see some leaves of strawberries remaining. And the novelty item we bump into once in a while in here, which is a cork. Many year old cork. Alright, I think we've encountered most of the leftovers. We bumped into a number of worms, so why don't we complete the excavation over here so we can get the feeding zone replenished. This is another slow going food item, the seed out of a mango. That too, I like to try to give it a little squeeze to see if I can help it along. Perhaps create an access point for worms to get in there and start working it from the other side. So that did feel to me like that had possibly opened up on its own already without my help. So that's a good thing, because I don't think it had been breached quite yet. From what I remember, last time it was still kind of a sealed shut seed, so the insides had not yet become available to the system. Alright, let's see here. How are we going to play this? We got newspaper top coverings that we're recycling, keeping around, but well, recycling in terms of keeping them in service as top coverings. However, this is going to get reused, and I'd like to really build this out as well. So we're going to come in with some of my prepared bedding here. That's a pretty big handful there. Let's see how that settles into the hole. That seems like a pretty good little foundation. We can always come back with more if we like, but let's begin dropping in stuff such as that old feeding zone indicator, now just turning into bedding to go alongside the feedings, and the old slow composting leftovers. I like to get them right back down where they belong in the middle of the action. Cork is going to take forever. And then these things, by the next time we check in, I'm sure there's not going to be a whole lot left of those cantaloupe rinds. But now, before putting the cotton towel back, I was thinking that some of the food can go right under it, and then we'll also put some of the food right on top of it. And some of it's frozen. Well, it's all frozen. So I feel bad for these little worms here on top that are going to get exposed to cold stuff. Maybe they'll kind of get their act together and slither off if we give them all a little bit of a tap on their backs. Hey, go, get out of here, split. Okay, whatever. Let's just drop in part of the feeding. So I got 2 banana peels per system. So perhaps one of the banana peels can go below the cotton towel, and the next one will go on top of it. And then a little bit of this too. A little bit below, a little bit on top. That should make for a pretty tempting little appetizer for the worms to come over for. And well, this is where we're going to expose some of these worms to the cold frozen veggies. Sorry, guys. And then from the other side, put on even more temptation. Yet another banana peel. But before we cover it up, yeah, it doesn't look to me like there's been a great deal of change. Last time I did hold it up to the window so I could see how much I can see through it. And it was starting to show signs that it was starting to, really become quite easy to see through the material. So I don't think that they're going to last much longer. From what I remember, the last time I tried composting parts of this towel, and that goes back quite some time now, I think it just sort of, happened very fast. Like I was still checking it out as a whole, intact towel, and then the next day it seemed like it was gone or something like that, or maybe something's distorting my recollection of it, but for some reason that's kind of the way I remember it. Before we start covering up here, those other things that I showed you earlier, the worm chow usually comes into play as something I like to mix with the coffee to try to make it into something less bland and monotonous. And then the other thing we do sometimes is we include a little bit of the grit to go along with the foods that we're giving them. You know, besides the second banana peel, we forgot to give them a little bit of this Brussels sprout leaves. And then we've left just enough for the next system. And I've not really been scaling the food quantities here, really. So you saw that the number of worms living in here is significantly greater than the amount of worms living over in the younger system. But I've just been feeding the same size, portions for the most part. If it starts to look like this stuff is just going to sit around and never get consumed in the amount of time that I'm giving it, then maybe we'll scale it back just so we can keep these on the same schedule and keep treating them as buddy bins, so to speak. But I think there's going to be some changes. I think we're probably going to see the worms sense that their population is a little bit small and could use a little boost. So I think they'll be mating, because I do notice lots of small worms. So maybe we're already starting to see signs of mating. This is I'm just kind of checking the outsides of the bin too. This is not where we've been feeding. This is just sort of the furthest section of the feeding, or of the bin from the feeding area. But still, it's quite crowded, and the worms look very happy to be in this stuff, and there's plenty of bedding, moisture. So everything looks good here. Let's get the new feeding zone indicator in place right there, and bring back the top covering newspapers, which after 12 days in service are holding up good. I don't see many signs of deterioration. There were worms hanging out on both of them. One of them is still right there. And that's usually going to result in the stuff getting nibbled on if there's worms hanging out on it. Alright, let's cover up and move on to bin number 2, the younger of the two systems. Just noticed a little chunk of debris that must have fallen out of the other system. I figured I'd get it off the tabletop, but at least get it back into service. Otherwise it'll just get swept up later. Alright. So as you would imagine, with systems that have been getting managed similarly, we're going to see certain things that are reflective of what we just saw in the other system, such as the top coverings being brand new and two-part the way they were. A feeding zone indicator showing where we last fed. One that we'll reuse since we've got a replacement for it. And we can start exploring the feeding area. I do remember watching the videos from the last check-in too, how it was so obvious how excavating the feeding zone of the other system showed, lots and lots of worm activity. Here we're going to see worm activity, but there's not as many worms to be seen. So let's see what we could see. My main thing here is just going to be not allowing for some sort of a glut to occur. So maybe the amount of food that we gave these systems was just enough to satisfy their hunger and leave no leftovers in 12 days, but I want to make sure they're able to keep up with the pace that I'm establishing. And if the more capable bin with the more worms in it, the older one, has the ability to outpace this one, then like I said earlier, we could kind of throttle back the food quantities when feeding this system in the future. So that's kind of the thing I want to keep an eye out for. So, see now, look at that big hole right there. That could just be me being rough handling it that way and causing that. But I do try to prevent allowing myself to be the cause of that sort of stuff. So here too, there's some good sized holes starting to develop in this fabric. Stuff is definitely weakened, but I don't want to test how weak it is. I'm going to just try to observe it visually. And now we're bumping into leftovers. Leftovers we did not see in the other system. Whatever this is, this could be bread maybe, just because it's kind of mushy and shows lots of mold growing on it. That's usually what happens with the bread. That's usually a good thing. We didn't see any leftovers of the bread in the last bin, so they must have really liked it and eaten it all up. I'm guessing we'll probably see, here's some more recycled top covering that became bedding last time, like we saw in the other bin as well. Now we're finally starting to see some worms hanging out down here. I see more mold, so yeah, I guess in the middle of that is more bread. Certainly not much. A little bit of leftovers showing up in this system, but I think we're keeping up. Well, here too, I'm already able to see the seed open up like that, so I know worms must be hanging out in it, but if it doesn't want to open up more than that on its own, I'm not going to try to force it. Otherwise, it's going to slip through my fingers, make a mess, probably get castings in my hair. It has happened before. So here and there, we're definitely bumping into little pockets of material that the worms are still inhabiting, working on whatever leftovers are still in here. A little bit of bread, a little bit of cantaloupe rind. They might have a little bit of material stuck to it still. I thought we might see another piece of cantaloupe rind. Here's, once again, similar to the other system, the pit out of an avocado. We must have been able to break that last time already. And it took until now for us to be able to break it in the previous system. Okay, this system definitely has a lot of bedding. Kind of makes me feel like maybe being proportional now, at least with the bedding, is possible in terms of matching their ability to keep up with me. Although with bedding, I guess there's really no danger in putting in what might appear to be too much, because I think the common saying is that when it comes to bedding in the worm bins, there's no such thing as too much, right? But yeah, we didn't see leftovers like this, so many at least, of the old top covering newspapers that were brought back down. We had a little bit of it in the other system, but not quite as much as we're seeing here. Slimy, moldy bread. Chunks of mold everywhere. So, and then back came in the old slow composting items, the pit, the seed, and let's not forget we wanted to get this back into service too. So before placing the cotton towel back down, let's do the same thing here. Let's put a banana below and a banana above the towel, with the yummy portion facing the towel, like so. I think we also sprinkled in a little bit of greenery last time. Then how did we do it? Did the coffee come afterwards? I believe it did. Here I'm seeing some sliminess. I think it's some of the bread that I wiped on there earlier. Another avocado pit. Very nice, very nice. The other thing we kind of forgot to sprinkle in was the grit. Let's throw a little bit in here as well. And, well, let's see, we've still got all those other yummy veggies for them. But the order doesn't matter so much, I don't think. I think we might have put the coffee in at the end. This time it's going in ahead of the veggies and the fruits. Get it all. That's about it, right? Let's see if we can break this thing up a little bit better and spread it out. Get our money's worth. Try to get the worms cruising this stuff so they'll come for the banana, but they'll be exposed to the towel. Wait, the towel's underneath, so I've got to do it this way. Alright, you get what I'm doing, right? Try to be consistent to the best of my ability. And I think we've got most everything going on here already. Did we do the... I can't remember. Did they get worm chow too? They probably did. Now they get a little extra too. Yeah, I don't want to cause a glut, so I want to be careful not to overfeed. Giving them a lot of bedding, that's not a big issue. That'll, you know, stimulate their breeding, I think. Giving them a lot of space to be in, they'll be able to recognize that there's ample room for more worms, so they'll make babies. So I do want to promote that if possible. But we're also just trying to keep in tune with sort of a little bit of a overall objective that I've set out for all my systems, which is just to try to run at a closer to add capacity state than I have done in the past. In the past, I've always used the bottom of the bin, a little bit of the material would start stacking up each time we checked in. But here I'm thinking, if it's this deep, let's come pretty darn close to, utilizing the space in the system. And, I don't think we used that nice big rich handful of the prepared bedding here because it just didn't seem like it was that necessary. If we were to do that every time, they wouldn't be able to keep up and we would just run out of space. So I think the recycling of the old feeding zone indicator, that was a good idea. Get it back down into the feeding area. But even though it was leftover top covering newspapers that were down there already, we're still holding out good too, as far as not just their condition, but their remaining quantity too. So I think we're good from a bedding perspective in here by applying only a minimal amount versus putting in a pretty good amount in the other bin. Maybe that'll be the way we try to dial in the differences, at least until such a time that the younger bin catches up with a greater size population to help it stay in step with the older system. All right, everyone, that's it for our check-in with the red wigglers now. I got a few things I got to take care of getting cleaned up and put away, but I'm not going to waste your time with that. Before I go really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's really appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.